It's time for the Give and Go podcast. Welcome back to the Give and Go podcast, episode 2 coming at you. It is a podcast all about everything basketball with our two basketball gurus, Ryan Steele and Ben Sperry. We've had such a positive outcry coming on Facebook, and we want to appreciate all the fans and the people. We're actually up to, I just checked it, we're up to 200 views on episode 1 on YouTube. So a big shout out to the fans for following us already in just this 1 week. We do have a Twitter page. We do have a Facebook page. So if you're liking us, make sure you follow us on that. Subscribe to YouTube, which we are only streaming through YouTube at the moment. But we're looking to bump up to Spotify, Amazon Music, other streaming services here pretty soon. So make sure you like, follow, and keep listening. We greatly appreciate it. So in episode 1, we had a all decades draft where Ben and Ryan had to draft 7 players, one from each decade. And let me tell you, this was a very popular segment, I think, and we got some big responses from it. So we're going to start this episode by just saying who we think had the better team. And I laugh at this because between the three of us, we have a group chat, and pretty much right after the draft ended, Ben was texting me asking for a trade request. So I think that's a little leeway into where this is going. But I'm going to go ahead and start with you, Ben. Just tell me your thoughts on who you think had the better draft, where your team ended up.
Yeah. So honestly, I feel like Ryan's team was built very much to play in the modern day game in a way that mine actually isn't. And what I mean by that is he has the ability to play more or less 4 out, 1 in, with lots of handlers, some shooting, and an elite big, and Hakeem. My team's a little bit more big heavy, playing Wilt and Tim Duncan together. I also don't really have an outside shooter aside from Steph Curry. Granted, he's the greatest shooter of all time.
He's pretty good.
You're right. So, if we were playing a very modern style basketball, we'd have matchup issues both ways, for sure, because also he wouldn't be able to really put a good lineup in to guard Tim Duncan and Wilt Chamberlain down low.
Right.
And weirdly, while he in theory would be switchable, there'd also be all kinds of issues guarding Steph Curry with his lineup as well. So it's very it would be a game of matchups, and whether or not my crashing the offensive glass, even including with my guy off the bench, Roy Tarpley, an elite offensive rebounder, would give enough trouble to his team, which is almost more predicated on pace and space. If we could slow a game down and make it about offensive rebounds and half court sets, I think my team has a pretty good shot. But it becomes more and more a game of 3s for 2s and playing fast, I think his team has an advantage.
Yeah. And just to go back on that, when you said that your bigs could create a matchup, I do think that you force LeBron, who would most likely be guarding Jordan, you might have to force him to go down and play big. A little bit, but
am I coaching? Because I'm putting Kobe on Jordan.
Yeah.
And
well, that was going to be
probably gonna have to move.
Yeah.
I would start. I probably have to go LeBron on Timmy to start.
I think it forces LeBron to play against bigs. He doesn't like to do that. Now it's not that he can't. It's not that he can't, but even against Tim Duncan, he's given up a lot of length. Right.
Against the big
and just a dude who is not used to guarding a one-on-one big. It's different now when you switch on a pick and roll and you're guarding a guy who's not an actual threat in the post. You're guarding arguably the best outside of maybe Wilt or Hakeem or Kareem, the best set of skills for a post big man.
Yeah.
Right. So I put his team in a real bind. But then on the other hand, with Larry Bird able to step out and shoot threes, I don't know who I'm going to put on him. Tim Duncan's not a natural matchup. Neither is Wilt, obviously. I think I actually do better against Akeem wildly because, like, even though Akeem's spectacular, I actually feel comfortable with either Tim Duncan or Wilt matching up with them. Yeah. But, and then on my wings, as good as Havlicek is defensively, I don't think – maybe nobody matches up with LeBron. Obviously, I think Jordan's better than Kobe, but that's a pretty good matchup too. Yeah. And then Curry against Oscar, I think is actually a big win for me. Maybe that's controversial.
For sure, I'll give you that. Yeah.
But I think Oscar, as great as he is, I think he would think Steph's an alien. Now, if he's allowed to hand check, maybe that helps him. Maybe it helps him if he's allowed to hand check him and ride him up the court. But Curry's just stepping out and shooting 3 after 3 after 3 on a guy from the 60s is going to be mind-blowing.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
And go ahead, Ryan.
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
I was just gonna say now. My dad surprisingly is a huge fan of this, and he really got into this part of the last week's episode. So he was all about Ryan's picking Oscar Robinson, and but he said, now what part of the Oscar Robinson are you drafting? Are you drafting the early Oscar Robinson who was more outside, could knock down, outside shots, or the end of the career Oscar Robinson who was driving more, penetrating more, getting shots around the basket? So I wanted to bring that up when Ben, you brought that up, because if has to penetrate, he's going against your big guys, down low, Wilt and Timmy, where outside he would have a little bit of a height advantage over Steph Curry. Because Oscar was 6'6", I think, 6'5", 6'6".
He was a big guard, and that's actually what's cool about Ryan's team is it's all a bunch of he can play big/medium ball, I guess, because it's actually small ball, but like everybody's large as a guard or a wing.
So my thinking on the whole thing was, especially with the Big O, with the Robertson pick, was from that era, try to find the best athlete who could also ball. Because I was thinking modern with the team.
Or Elgin might have been another pick for that too.
Elgin, but I knew I had my wings solidified. And I knew when I went to the 2010s and I took LeBron, I couldn't take Steph, and I wasn't going to take a point guard from the 90s. So I just had to get a point guard where I could get it, because it was the strategy, I wanted to find one who was mobile, who could move and groove, all that. But when you say if he's driving, he's seeing Timmy and Wilt.
Yeah.
That's why I picked Bird, because he's not. Because if you leave him down there now in the paint, it's a kick out to Bird. Or if Braun has the ball, I wanted to have, like Ben said, we could play small ball, medium ball. And if I had to, in a real game, if Akeem was in foul trouble, like I said, Mike and bring them stiff knees out here. You're 7 foot. Try to do what you can, big fella.
Yeah, I think you're in a lot of trouble if Akeem's out of the game.
Mm-hmm. Oh, 100%. I had to pick somebody from the 50s, though.
That's true. And also, here's another thought I had, though. Is Oscar a little redundant in his skill set if you're going to have LeBron?
True.
Because
LeBron,
you're going to have LeBron with the ball in his hand so much that I don't know. And that's what I try to do with my team is Curry can be an off-ball. In fact, he's even more of a threat off the ball than with the ball. But, of course, he can also bring it up for me. I actually envision my team doing something like 90s basketball where you bring it up, set it up, and run triangle offense. And just have, a lot of post-ups, a lot of cutting, a lot of movement. But, styles make fights, because I think your team can play a much more modern style.
I'm glad you said that. That's exactly the point I was going to make was I think the winner of this depends on which era this is played in, whether there's if there's no 3-point line and we play this in 1970, yeah, dude, your team is probably, your team's going to have an easier time getting twos or tough twos. I mean, think, MJ is probably the best ever at tough twos. I mean, you would have that dude locked down, hand in the face, and he'd fade and hit. You can't do nothing about it.
Or the way he used to drive, even though there was no spacing at all, and just do some crazy thing and finish.
Eras, and you say styles make fights. Right. Perfectly put. Because from 2007 on, I like my chances in that era of pace and space. From probably, 95 under, your team's going to give me problems because teams didn't play this way, So I did go kind of more modern. I think this, though, says it all.
I think that's fair. I think the one thing I was kicking myself for almost right away is if I redid my non-Hall of Fame pick from the 80s, I'd pick Dale Ellis.
And we speak like it was almost immediately after when you were like,
and the reason I was thinking that is Dale Ellis is before Reggie Miller took over the 3-point record. And now
100%
beating it. He was the greatest 3-point shooter of all time in the NBA, and he did it in an era that they didn't really shoot that many. Right. He had 1 or 2 years in the late 80s. He averaged almost 27, 28 points a game. We're talking about a legitimate scorer that can really shoot the ball. And if you put him in a modern game, you know, he would stretch the floor immensely. And then I could go small ball. I could go with just Tim Duncan or Wilt Chamberlain in there as my lead big, and then move up, you know, whether probably Havlicek, but whatever, and play 4 and just play small and see what we could do at playing the same style.
I think the non-Hall of Fame player twist was kind of the coolest, like, strategic move of this whole thing, was knowing what era you thought you could afford to take it from and be like, okay, like I thought like, okay, I already got Hakeem, so I can't get Kareem anyway from the 70s. Let's just get my guy from the 70s and go. That was kind of the tricky part that I liked about it.
Slight backstory. It's you taking Bird and not Magic from the 80s kind of screwed up my non-Hall of Fame trajectory, because I wasn't going to go 80s, and I kind of pulled Roy Tarpley out of my butt.
I wondered. I was like, where did he? I was like looking at my phone, like, where did he get Roy Tarpley from?
You know, I did want to shout out his rec specs, but
who were you originally going to go with then?
So I was going to have Bird as another one of my shooters, so then I can play more, even move him up to the 4.
Right. See, very much
like you did. And then I was going to like play around with this because like I think I ended up being locked into Havlicek because I needed another wing really bad.
Right.
So like it was going to change everything. I was going to like get like a bigger player from the 70s instead, and just have like a triumvirate of unstoppable bigs.
Right.
Personally,
and if I already had Kareem,
I love the Havlicek pick. I thought that was great.
Don't get me wrong, he's great. But if you would have had Bird, then I wouldn't have. You know, I might have went that way. Yeah. And then I would have maybe taken like Kareem there and had Kareem and Wilt, and then just used a 2000s guy as my non-Hall of Fame. Which probably would have been Jason Terry, just because I love him.
Oh, yeah.
But I don't know if my team would have been better either. It's just different.
Yeah. Well, let's. Oh, go ahead, Ryan. No, you're good.
Well, I kind of had the same idea too. I got stuck on that Hall because to me, Benny, I think you would agree, the best non-Hall of Famers come from that 90s era, guys that, you know, we kind of idolized growing up that didn't make it. And I almost could have flip-flopped there. Once you took Jordan and he was out for me in the 90s, I could have went Kareem 70s and took a better non-Hall of Famer in the 90s. That's probably my only regret, is because Hakeem and Kareem, you're talking same pedestal there. So that's my only regret on my picks.
And you know, one of my other thoughts on all this was you could create heck of a team from dudes that we just didn't pick up. Oh. And I was thinking, and then maybe even better than ours. I don't know, but like you'd have to think about it, right? Like for instance, you could go 10s, you could get Kevin Durant, you could get Shaq from the 2000s, Magic from the 80s, you know, Kareem from the 70s,
or even Jerry West to fill out
Jerry West from this. Yeah, Jerry West from the 60s, and I
have fun in the 50s though, buddy.
I do have to mention this is that probably about a half hour after I uploaded the podcast last week, I got a text from my aunt, and she said, "I can't believe that neither one of those guys picked Dr. J. I understand their picks, but Dr. J is my favorite." I think so. But let's take a quick look here at the numbers. If we look at our Facebook comments, you guys actually ended up being even on Facebook, which is I think is kind of, you know, just kind of even what we said. But if you factor in the fact that even Ben, you said Ryan's team. My dad picked Ryan's team. He's somebody I talked to about it. And then here's my the game goes to overtime, and I ran this through my simulator, which if you didn't know, my simulator is just my brain. But the game ends up going into overtime, and it actually ends on a buzzer beater. LeBron finds Kobe for the game winner. So that's where I end up. But
and he misses, right?
No, he made it. It's a game winner, man. He made it. But
he actually has terrible clutch stats, though.
Hey,
hey. When it counts,
I drew up the play for Bird to shoot it. I didn't know Kobe was going to shoot it. Okay.
When it counts, right, man.
He's going to take it, man.
And this is actually going to take us to our first break. Thanks for joining us on the Give and Go podcast. We'll be right back. All right. Hey, welcome back to the Give and Go basketball podcast with Ben Sperry and Ryan Steele. Again, if you are listening and like what we have to say, please subscribe to us on YouTube, like us on Facebook. We do have a Twitter page. Make sure we follow that. And we are going to be jumping to other streaming services soon, like Spotify, Amazon Music. But anyway, so this segment, I mentioned in our last one with the draft that we have a group text between us, and we're constantly just shooting ideas back and forth and stuff. And one idea that keeps coming up in this thing is just players who are either overhyped or just underrated. And there's one name, and I think we can all agree on this because I am a huge fan of this player. And Ben, actually, I'm gonna let Ben talk about this because I think Ben Sperry is the president of this guy's fan club. So Ben, go ahead and take it and just say the idea behind this.
Yeah. So the idea is basically to figure out who are the players, not just currently, but historically, that are underrated in the sense that they've never been all-stars, but are legitimately great basketball players. And the name for this that I'm going to throw out there is CJ McCollum. And I say CJ McCollum because he had a hot start to this season, but he's been a great, really elite offensive player in the NBA for a number of years now. Sometimes gets lost in the shuffle because he plays second fiddle to Dame Lillard, who obviously is one of the best, 3 or 4 guards in the entire NBA. Absolutely. But CJ McCollum literally started this season on a tear. He did get hurt and he's missed a few games. But he was playing out of his mind for the first 13, 14 games of the season or whatever it was that he played. And he's done this before, whether in the playoffs or just big moments. He is one of the most elite offensive players and complete ISO scorer, can play off the pick and roll, can play in spot up and in space, and can create for others. So what we're going to do is we're going to create what I call a CJ McCollum All Star team. We're going to pick players, both Steele and I together. We're going to try to create a good all-star team the only criteria is they never played or were selected to play in an NBA all-star game.
Right. So I just want to reiterify this. This is not a draft. We're not going to do it that style this week. But these guys are just going to go ahead and rattle off their picks just for the best guys, again, that just, aren't really, ever mentioned on an all-star caliber list. So Ben, go ahead back and let me know who you got, because I'm excited for this. I just want to know. I don't know any of these names, so I'm excited for this.
Yeah, and I mean, I think Steele I'll just work kind of together on this one. But if you look, as you go back and look historically, I think it's actually easier to find guards that kind of fit this criteria. Would you agree?
So we were talking kind of earlier today, and I was like, is it this obvious? Am I missing guys that now? I kind of made a judgment call on, because I was originally doing a starting 5. Mm-hmm. So I kind of had, point guard through center, and I was working it out that way. And I kind of went with personal preference on some guys that were close, some guys that I just like more. Yeah. But guards, especially point guards, seem to be a little easier to find than like traditional centers at least in my findings. I don't know what you thought.
Well, yeah. So let's start here. Just among current players, I mean, CJ McCollum's obviously the name of the team, but Mike Conley,
I left him off because it was obvious.
Right. But I would say the next one that immediately came to mind for me is Mike Conley.
Mike Conley Jr., yes.
He's a guy.
Starting point guard.
Yeah, I mean, look, he's been one of the better point guards, but never maybe enough of the best point guard to be on an all-star team. In fact, he's one of the highest paid players in the league at one point because he's
for a few years,
instrumental to team success. And he continues to be very, very good for the Jazz.
I think an issue that comes up with him is, especially all-star teams, it's voted for one end of the floor more than the other. Now, we've seen guys get in like Draymond over the years who, are more defensive-minded players clearly. But I think his slight is people don't value enough of his defense, how good of a ball stopper he is on point guards in a point guard-driven league. So I think that gets overlooked for all-star voters. But yeah, Mike Conley to me is the number one point guard on the all snub list, basically.
Yeah. Who else do you have from today's game?
My second one, and I like this guy more because I grew up watching him, but Mike Bibby was on that list.
Arizona, right?
Yes, sir. Arizona Wildcat. He broke our heart in '97, dude. Carolina.
Bingo.
But Mike Bibby, I loved his whole game from, wearing Jordan 12 lows as a king. And it just, to me, he was so awesome, as a player. And he did get overshadowed because you played on a team with Peja, who was lights out, and C. Webb, who was obviously a top, 5 power forward at the time. But if you looked at his stats and Conley's stats, offensively at least, they're really comparable. And Bibby's top tier years were slightly better offensively than.
And shout out to those early 2000 Kings, right?
Some of me and you, some of our favorite teams of all time.
Some of the best teams that never won a championship.
Yes.
And
Keon
Bibby,
Clark, where you at?
and Bibby was actually in a lot of ways the closer for that team, especially in the playoffs. It wasn't as much C-Webb. I mean, Peja could really shoot, but Bibby
had to get it. He had to get it somewhere else. Exactly.
Right. And running that high screen and roll, especially against the Lakers where Shaq didn't step out. Bibby just hit shot after shot after shot.
Yep. So, I mean, is there any – okay, like this. We can go through position-wise, 1 through 5, but are there any other point guards that you would put on that Michael Bibby Conley tier?
Actually, yes. And I think this guy is definitely up there. Rod Strickland from the 90s.
Yes.
Yeah.
Rod Strickland was actually an all-NBA player without making an all-star game.
Right on.
So to me, he has to be on there.
Bullets, or who was that with?
I believe it was the Bullets. He led the NBA in assists that year.
Right.
Maybe 97, 98, somewhere in there.
It might have been earlier, honestly.
And it could have been. I don't have it pulled up, but he was a legitimately really good point guard for a bunch of teams too, and never got selected for an all-star game. So that would be my other point guard that I throw out.
So yeah, we'll do almost like a gold, silver, and bronze. Those are the top 3. Moving on to shooting guards. This was another good one, and I know I almost 100% know, other than CJ, who your number one guy is, and I'm gonna tell you my number one guy first. I have your guy second, I believe. I went Jamal Crawford. Jamal Crawford is one of my personal favorite players of all time. To me, outside of Kyrie and Steph, I think his handle might be better. His handle is crazy, shot making ridiculous. Think of some of the great teams he's been on towards the end of his career. We talk about closers. He was the closer for teams that had all-stars on it. You know what I mean?
Future Hall of Famers.
Future Hall of Fame guys. And they were like, yo, Jamal, get in here and finish this game off. Top of the key, shake and bake. I mean, that was his
incredible
game,
ISO scorer. Another guy that's kind of like that in today's game is Lou Williams. They call these guys just professional scorers.
Yes,
they just come in. Now, Jay Crossover or Jamal Crawford, he had more. You're right. In terms of just the smoothness of his hand.
He had the boom bat. He's so bad. He's so bad. Can I tell you who I think your number one guy at shooting guard is?
Oh, you already know, but go ahead. Yeah, I love Jason Terry. So he's a guy. and a lot of guys, and again, similar mold, guys that win 6th man of the year, scoring off the bench. But Jason Terry's another great example of a true
get
closer.
Their own.
And he's a true closer. I mean, even years obviously.
Don't bring that up, though.
Well, we did it against the Heat, but I mean, even the year that they went to the finals and lost to the Heat, I mean, he was a starter, I think, at that point. But he was an unbelievable shooter, scorer, and did it in hot stretches. And in the fourth quarter tended to be his hot stretch. Dirk Nowitzki's the greatest player on the team, but
where when the ball found him and you're playing against him, if you're a fan rooting against him, you were just sick to your stomach. You just knew he's gonna make this shot. You just felt like he never missed for stretches of games. And there's not too many players that think of that aren't all-stars that kind of carry that, that bag with them.
And something that goes along with dudes like this, like the Jamal Crawfords, Jason Terrys, et cetera, is they play with a certain level of confidence.
Irrational confidence.
I think that's what Bill Simmons calls them. And it's a great phrase, but like you almost need that to be great, right? Like, okay, yes. I'm not LeBron, but you know what, LeBron, you can't guard me. I'm going to hit this 3 on you down the stretch.
Now, I think it's key to have that, but when you're Mario Chalmers, I love you, Mario Chalmers, but that irrational confidence would keep me up at night. So that's a little shout out.
I'm going to interject for a minute here and just say that it's funny to me because, and Steele, you and I have had these conversations before many of times, is that each and every one of these guys that you guys are mentioning are the glue guy to a team. Those guys that you can always count on.
Oh, 100%.
It's not about them. They're going, and we talk again, and I'm going to mention this about 1,000 times in this podcast. Steele and I are huge North Carolina fans, so most of our conversations are about Carolina that. Fan? Oh yeah. Can you tell? But we talk about this all the time, and like the Theo Pinsons, just anybody and everybody at North Carolina we talk about. But anyways, so it's funny to me that these guys are just those guys that are always in the right places at the right moments. Now, their stats might not be LeBron James, Michael Jordan types caliber, right, all-star caliber, but they're just always in the right place at the right time, doing the right things at the right time. So, all right, back to you guys. I just had to interject.
No, but you're right. That's a great point because like the unselfishness of a guy like Jason Terry, who played on terrible Hawks teams and could have just continued playing for bad teams and getting numbers and making all-star games. But instead, he stayed on a great team and was like, yeah, I'll come off the bench. Yeah, I'll be the 3rd, 4th option. But when you need me, I'll be the number 1 guy to go to. And even Jamal Crawford, like we said, he was coming off the bench for those Clippers teams and some other great teams where they're asking him to be the guy at the end, but he doesn't start. It just takes a lot of unselfishness to be like, okay, I'll be there in the end when you need me. I don't need to start. And it's a message that a lot of young kids should get today too.
And we're going to have to move on to another position, but you could load this position to me, like the combo guards, shooting guards. There's just so many. Because even guys like JJ Redick never made an all-star game. Amazing shooter.
Yes.
He had like a 2 or 3 year run there where you definitely were like,
yeah. I mean, you go back in time, Ron Harper averaged 20 a couple times in the 80s, and he never made an all-star game. And even as an older player, was a very good defender. You got guys like Derek Harper, who was a legitimately really, really good player for the Mavericks back in the day. There's lots of guards that I think fit this profile.
I just couldn't find a year where I thought Derek Harper deserved to make an all-star team over the people that, what I'm saying?
That's fair.
That was my only thing with Derek Harper was. So we go to the wing position, to the small forward. I had one clear one that I thought was Richard Jefferson.
He was very good for a stretch of the 2000s.
Right, especially almost immediately into the league was like kind of like his best spurt there. Now, you're going to be great when you play with like Peyton Manning of basketball when Jason Kidd is throwing you dimes, obviously. But just what he gave you from 3 levels of scoring, to be able to knock down a corner 3, to pull up and hit a pull-up jumper, and obviously he was great at attacking the rim and dunking in transition. Wasn't the greatest ball handler, I'd say. That was probably his one thing that he lacked, but I thought he was awesome in those early 2000s there.
One guy I thought of when we were doing this as like a wing that would fit in here is Jalen Rose, who is pretty darn good for the Pacers at one point.
I was going to say, was the Pacers, I would take his
he came in the league as a point guard, an oversized point guard for the Nuggets, but he didn't really take off there. He was really good. It was
his first year with the Pacers. I think it was a few years into the Pacers, right?
It was like right around the turn of the 2000s, late 90s, 2000s, because I think he might have been on one of the Pacers teams that lost the Bulls in 7. But he became more and more of a factor as, like, I think Chris Mullin was there briefly and he got old, and then Reggie started, getting a little bit older. They started going to Jalen Rose more as an ISO, like, big guy that could create some shots for both him and others.
And a secondary ball handler to Mark Jackson in some of those teams.
Yes, and he was very, very good, I thought, for a period of 2 or 3 years there.
Agreed.
Putting up numbers for the Pacers.
So Richard Jefferson, Jalen Rose. I really didn't have anybody else at that small forward that I thought.
So this one's hard because I don't know whether to call him a small or power forward, and it would be different in today's game. But Tony Kukoc in the 90s was a big favorite of mine.
Yes.
Yeah. Again, though, it's tough to say what year he would have made it, because at his best was what was it his rookie year when he came in when Jordan wasn't there?
Yeah, and he came in, and I think he came in a little older because he came.
Well, yeah, he played overseas, right.
Yeah, but no, he was very good, and then he was sixth man of the year in '96.
Yes,
right. But he was a guy that was a closer on that team.
And
he was
memorably,
really
Scotty freaked out in the playoff game because they wanted Kukoc to shoot the shot in the playoffs.
Right, and also he was kind of before his time. If he played now, he'd be a stretch four and shoot threes the whole time.
Yeah,
and his elite playmaking ability would come out more too.
Mm-hmm.
Boy, would he be a liability on defense. Woo!
Sure.
Sure.
Yeah. One last shout out that I think fits this mold is Cedric Maxwell, who was an NBA Finals MVP.
Yeah, can't leave him
in
an
All-Star game. So
he's probably the number. It could be the Cedric Maxwell All Stars, honestly, if we wanted to be fair.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, power forwards now. I had two that were standouts to me, and they are kind of more recent. I got Lamar Odom.
Yes, definitely. That's who's going to be number one.
Because this is where
he's a better version of Kukoc, right? Like he can rebound and play defense a little bit better. Yeah.
Because this is where I get into a numbers and talent thing, like in unselfishness. His talent was 20, 10, and 5.
Oh, yeah. He could have been.
But because the teams he starred on didn't need 20, 10, and 5, he was more, 14, 8, and 3. But talent-wise, he's one of the best power forwards to me that never made it. He's awesome. He was fucking great.
Yeah, no, he was so good in his prime. The Lakers teams that he helped win, 2 or 3 championships. No, I guess it was 2. Late in Kobe's career was awesome. Who else was I thinking of for power forward? I had
just looking at Lamar Odom's stats here. I pulled him up. He was almost, for his career, he almost averaged a double-double. He was at 13 points and just about 8.5 rebounds for a career. For a guy like that,
And we said about other guys on this list, I mean, he could have stayed on bad teams and, like I said, had 22, 12, and 8 or something. He could have had years like that, but instead he played on a small dynasty, basically, that went to some championships and won. So I give him a lot of respect for that. And I thought, if guys like Draymond or Kyle Korver can make an all-star game for being on a great team, he's kind of a guy that you sacrifice and should have been on an all-star team. Then the other guy had power forward was Josh Smith.
Oh, okay. See, I wouldn't have thought of him, but that's a good one.
Yeah, because I was like, because I was thinking of this kind of era, that 2000s era. Yeah. And I was like, I feel like we forget about Josh Smith because of what older in his career Josh Smith became. Almost a joke.
Yeah.
Dude, shoot another 3. We're going to let you shoot as many of those as you want. But prime time, like that 5-year stretch.
He's incredibly athletic. Yeah.
I mean, just what he did defensively, what he did in transition.
Low-key was a good passer. Yeah, he could do some stuff.
Right.
Yeah.
Like he could do some stuff. So that was the only guy I had below Lamar for power forward.
So I have an older one that I was thinking of, Sam Perkins. And it's actually interesting as we go through this. There's a lot of lefties are way overrepresented on this for some reason. And I don't know if there's something to that, but
Sam Perkins.
Yeah, Sam Perkins was he was kind of like before his time in the sense that he could shoot threes and step out a little bit. Had great length, so he's a decent, on defense.
And
where did he go to school?
Yeah, I was just gonna say, just so we have this, make this clear. Where did he go to? Oh yeah, that's right. All right, North Carolina. Hey,
Benny, that was the only center I really found that I thought could have in some of those years. He just unfortunately came up in an era where the center was the best player on most teams.
Yeah. Very true.
But even guys like Arvydas, who we love.
Right. That's who I was going to move to for centers. I was going to say Arvydas has to be one
It's just tough because you look and it's like as great at skill he was. If he would have came over 8 years prior, I'm sure he would have made all-star teams. By the time he came over, he's in his mid-30s already, or early
he was
30s.
Up there, and he'd already gone through some knee issues and stuff. So he was kind of immobile. But I will say, Look at his stats from his first year over. He averaged like 16, 10, and 3. Yeah. And again, another guy, he could shoot a little bit from the outside. So but they didn't really shoot that many threes then, especially centers. I think, he was still really good when he came over. So we're seeing what he could have looked like with his son.
Yeah.
Who is an all-star. And his son's putting up incredible stats for the Pacers, kind of under the radar. We're talking like 20 and 12 and 5 or 6 assists. And
he's their best player.
Arvydas could have been that, maybe even better. We don't know. Just because he didn't come over till too late.
So that kind of wrapped up my guys. Do you have any others that you thought were?
In terms of centers, Serge Ibaka is a current guy that maybe he's never all-star good, but he is defensive player of the year type good for a while, blocked a lot of shots. Actually has become maybe more valuable than his stats would suggest because he can step out and shoot so well as play good defense.
And still defend. That's a big thing for now.
So, he's one for me that I think I would give
me, he's a valuable guy that you want on a championship team.
Right.
When we talk about all-stars, though, to me, that game doesn't translate. Just being a defender at a stretch 4 basically is what he's become.
But defense is a very important part of the game. And I had to double check. Dikembe did make all-star games because he was going to be my number one for this, but then he did make all-star games. So I found trying to find his equivalent. And Marcus Camby was the closest I could think of.
Ooh, yes.
Yeah. Who is really, really good for a number of years for several teams, but he was never an all-star. He was just a guy who gave you a double-double and a bunch of blocks.
Yeah, 12 and 8 and blocks some shots.
Yeah.
Great player, but in his own right, but to me, not an all-star.
Well, I think that's a perfect place to say, boom, there we go. You have it. The best
CJ McCollum All Stars.
The best CJ McCollum All Stars. And CJ, if you're listening and you ever want to be a guest on the show, hey, we got you. But we're going to go ahead and take a quick break.
Lehigh, and you beat Duke in the tournament. So thank you forever. I made fun of my friend for years off that. I appreciate you, CJ. Thank you.
Go Tar Heels. All right, this is the Give and Go Basketball Podcast. Stick around. Thanks. All right, welcome back to the Give and Go Basketball Podcast. I just have to say this one thing. I think we're getting dangerously close to having more time, planning and prepping this, and like in between segments when we're not recording. I think we have more time doing that than actually recording. So I just hope all the listeners are having as much fun as we are having doing this. So anyways, it brings us up to our next segment, which we have to tell a little story about this before we get into it, is the fact that another thing that when we finished recording our first episode, Ben first thing says, okay, guys, I just want to point out that the lightning round was not very quick, and it was not lightning at all. And when I went back and looked at the numbers, we spent about 20 minutes on the lightning round. So the funny thing is I walk into my parents watch my daughter, and so I walk in to pick her up, and my dad goes, "Hey, I watched the episode," or I watched it, and that was great. I had so much fun. My only critique would be you might want to consider shortening the lightning round. So I said, Dad, we're already on it. So we're going to try to keep this one short a little bit. But anyways, it is time for the lightning round. So I still think that's better than anything else.
Get out!
So anyways, we're just going to keep this short and sweet. You guys can't think too long about this. I'm just going to give it to you. For the sake of the drill here, Ryan, I'm going to have you answer first today. So give me your answer, and then Ben, you have to answer pretty much immediately after that. So, all right, 5 questions. And then just give me your top answer. I might, lead into a couple questions, but we'll deal with that later. All right. All-time favorite basketball movie. Go.
White Man Can't Jump.
Blue Chips.
I mean, two great movies, but you're both wrong. It's Hoosiers. All right.
That's white people stuff.
White guys.
Hey, I have it right here on my wall. There's a quote from it. All right. Greatest. We last week I talked about my love of big men because I'm so short. Benny, this one's all about me and you here. Greatest point guard of all time.
Steal first.
Steal first.
Oh, okay. Greatest point guard of all time. I'm gonna say go Magic. Easy answer.
Ben, you have one shot to get this correct.
I'm thinking about being contrary just to be contrary because
I'm gonna do the same thing.
The answer is Magic, in my opinion.
You guys are both wrong. It is none other than the John Stockton.
I mean, he was great. But here's the thing. John Stockton
No.
Great.
We're going to come back to this. You just hold on there. Hold on there, Kemosabe. All right. All right.
You heard the lightning.
You have to choose 90s Shaq versus 2000s Shaq. Ryan, go.
2000 Shaq got the rings on his finger. I'm going 2000 Shaq.
Ben?
I'm going to go 90s Shaq because low-key he was actually maybe just as good, if not better. He's in better shape. Mm-hmm. And I think he just wasn't in the right situation yet.
My thing is if you put Shaq into today's game, you want 90 Shaq playing in today's game just because, like Ben said, he's not playing. Anyways, moving on. And this one cracks me up a little bit because we were talking about when we were talking earlier about the recap of the draft, and I said Kobe hit the game-winning shot. And Ryan said Kobe actually wasn't a good clutch player. I have clutch player, greatest of all time, clutch player.
I think it's pretty easy. Big shot Bob, Robert Horry. Give me all three.
Dude, I almost said Robert Horry should be considered one of the great all-stars or non-all-star all-stars, right? Like
he broke so many hearts. It's got to be.
He did. I mean, serious answer is Jordan.
Just do it, Homer. I knew you were going to say it.
But Larry Bird's not that far off. Larry Bird had a lot of spectacular
performances.
You got to look to college for this one, North Carolina Marcus Page. All right, moving on.
It would be Jerry McNamara if he went to college.
Yeah, there you go. Do you know that Jerry McNamara, just a side fact, actually went to I think he went to Scranton Catholic, and he is actually like third all-time Pennsylvania.
We looked that up. Yeah, me and you looked that up.
Yeah, that's right. We did. All right, last one here. Now, we were talking about underrated players in our last segment. So now I want to go to overhyped or overrated players. So it's one or the other here. You have to choose who deserves a second chance in the NBA. Is it Sam Bowie or Anthony Bennett? Second chance, go.
Hold on. This is the only thing I'm going to say for a qualifier. Second chance, meaning they didn't do the bad thing that got them out, or okay.
Yes.
Okay. I'm going to go Bowie because he got hurt.
Yeah.
Bennett was just picked way too high. Was never that great in college. The Cavs just terribly ran and picked a bad dude to be number one pick, and then he got fat. That's my answer.
Yeah, I feel like Sam Bowie, if he did it differently and just he was healthy. And another one, that modern equivalent, I mean, of that to some extent is Greg Oden, because he's in the Kevin Durant draft, and everybody's like, well, you passed up Kevin Durant. What's your problem? But if Greg Oden was healthy, you never know what he could have turned into.
Right, especially in that era where that player was more sought after than now.
Yeah, but I'd say Bowie for the same reason, though.
Yeah.
That was my choice, too, just because the Cavs took Bennett. Anyways, so getting back to that whole point guard thing, because Ben, you got a little testy there.
Well, let me say it like this. like Magic Johnson, I think, is one, but really the discussion to me, who's next? And I think there's a really tight discussion, but I don't even think it's Stockton next, even though he has incredible counting stats. The case for Stockton is he has so many counting stats that are unbelievable, and he was good for forever. But the case against him is that if you go year by year, I don't know if he was ever actually the best point guard in the league when he played at any given time. How can he be the greatest of all time if he was never the greatest during his time?
Well, he's the greatest of all time because he's my greatest of all time. Because I just
wait, who Magic or who'd you say?
Stockton. I love John.
Okay, so
Stockton,
me and Ben kind of have this convo a lot with point guards, and we kind of do more of a. Would you agree, Ben? A Mount Rushmore of 4, like for us, and I think he agrees. It's Magic, Stockton, Steph, and Chris Paul. I mean, that's usually the 4 that we bring up.
Well, you'd also have Isaiah.
Oh yeah, Isaiah. Right. Yeah, so Isaiah. Yeah, those 5 though, really. Yeah. You know, in any order to me are so. I mean, Isaiah is crucially underrated. If we talk about underrated players, like
and then like dude
that beat Magic, Jordan, and Bird. I mean, come on now.
Yeah.
And then there's a whole extra tier of just spectacular guys like Jason Kidd and Gary Payton.
So many.
And there's just so many. Oscar Robertson, if you want to call him point guard. There's just so many that you can throw in the next tier. But I think those guys are the best. And, you know, we'd have a whole nother discussion someday. But I think Chris Paul, if he ever won a championship, I think it would seal it. Like, I think he's actually so close to the top of this list. It's crazy.
Yeah.
So
not everybody thinks so, but
it's funny that you mentioned him because the other night I was laying awake and couldn't sleep. So I turned on a game and Phoenix was on, and you know, just the way he commands the floor, you know, still like does. You said, I mean, he doesn't, but you know what, he's a couple years older than us, I think, right? He's about 36-ish, I think, maybe.
He's real old for an NBA point guard. Let's put it like that. And,
let's put it like that. But,
and he's still not just good; he's great. Even in today's game.
The types of passes he was playing or throwing and just the way he runs an offense. Yeah. I really wish he would have teamed up with a LeBron or a like a Steph Curry or somebody who could have helped them out a little bit, because I would like to but
to me, that's where he gets too much of a leniency. Is he was on some truly great teams.
Yeah, there's Clippers teams.
Yeah, that's true.
You talk about what didn't they have, basically. They had a superstar in Blake Griffin. They had a top defensive rim running center in DeAndre. They had shooters everywhere. They had Jamal Crawford to create for his own off the bench. Plethora of wing defenders, Matt Barnes through the years, whoever you want to name, they had those guys. I mean, you look at those games that they needed in the playoffs, he was either hurt or didn't perform. He choked away at OKC playoff game when they were up against them in a series. And they choked away a series against what was it, the Rockets the one year?
Well, actually,
up 3-2.
Harden quit, and the rest of the Rockets carried that game in Game 6 because Josh Smith wouldn't miss a three.
They were down like 20-some points.
Josh Smith
Chris
and
Paul,
Corey
they were
Brewer.
up 20-some points in a closeout game. I'm sorry. You got to win that, man. Like
it was Josh Smith and Corey Brewer brought the Rockets back.
You can't lose to Josh Smith and Corey Brewer.
And not to mention, at the end of the day, it's also the lightning round. So again, it goes to John Stockton, greatest point guard ever. All right, we're going to go ahead and take our last break. We're going to come back in with our last segment. This is the Give and Go Basketball Podcast. Thanks for joining us. Welcome back to the Give and Go Basketball Podcast with Ben Sperry and Ryan Steele. So in this past week, there has been some huge NBA performances by some players, and I think it's worth noting. So I'm gonna just leave this open for one of you. Go ahead and take it. Let's just start talking about some of the huge numbers that some of these guys are putting up. Whoever wants to take it, because it's unreal.
I guess the amount of 60 and 50-point games we've seen recently, and even throughout the beginning of the season till now, it's kind of crazy, especially in an era where people are now shooting further and further away from the basket compared to when we grew up. It comes back to the same conversation we usually have about people saying that college plays all this defense and NBA doesn't play any defense. Well, college kids don't shoot from 35 feet from the hoop. So it's kind of hard to guard people when Dame Lillard ends a playoff series 10 steps behind the 3-point line, and it's a good shot for him. So I think that's the talent level you're seeing. But like some of the individual performances that we've seen are so crazy because of the efficiency. Like you got Steph going for 62 and 57 on 18 for 31 and 19 for 31 shooting. And the defense is draped all over him, and those are tough shots he's taking. It just, to me, that's crazy. The shot making today is crazy, and how they get the shots off. It's tough enough, Ben, and to get 31 shots off in an NBA game, to hit that percentage it's unreal.
Especially if the team is gearing their whole defense to try to stop you from getting those shots.
With no Clay for the spacing. I mean, it's not just him, but, it's nuts.
No, he's a great example. His ability to run around, get open looks off of screens, as well as do it off the dribble. He looks just like he did during the unanimous MVP years. The Warriors aren't quite as good, but he's spectacular. And watching him versus Luka was really, really fun the other day. I actually watched it a second time just because it was so good. Luka was just as good as Steph in terms of his shot making that game. Just incredible shot making and creation by both of them. I do want to shout out perhaps my favorite NBA player right now, which is Nikola Jokic. Averaging a near triple-double for the season, but put up 50 just the other day in a loss against the Kings. Watching that one was a lot of fun too, because he can mix stepping out and shooting the threes with the pick-and-roll game and just straight posting you up because he's so big. Like he's
huge.
He's a giant man. He's not super athletic, but he does hilariously interesting, skillful things. Like he'll do an up and under, but never actually jump and then just finish over the top. Or he'll do a fadeaway 1-footer where he throws the ball up about 28 feet in the air and it comes down and splashes just because. His ability to score at an elite level without really jumping almost at all is so fun to watch for me.
His finesse, I just want to point this out. He's 25 years old. So for a 25-year-old kid at about 7 foot, 6'11", 285 pounds, his touch and just ability to score is amazing. And
scoring is not even his best attribute. He's actually one of the, if not the best NBA passer of all time at the center position. He has to be top 3. And Arvidas. Right. And Bill Walton maybe back in the day, but like we're talking about a guy that's unbelievable in terms of setting up his teammates for basket after basket. And it gets to the point that it's kind of like Nash back in the day where you almost guarded him for the pass, and then he reminded you he was one of the greatest point guard shooters of all time. He's starting to put up big scoring numbers this year because people are like, okay, we're not going to let him throw the ball to everybody else for shots, so let's get him go one-on-one in the post. And then he eats you alive because he's so skilled and huge.
So we constantly discuss big men in different eras, and could he translate? Could Wilt play today? Could you imagine centers in the 80s and 90s and even the early 2000s trying to guard? Could you imagine Shaq in the 2002 trying to guard Nikola Jokic, what he does right now? You know how funny that would look?
He would confuse everybody, right? And
you would be like, this is sorcery. What is happening right now? Yeah. Why is he doing this?
And low key, like maybe this is the best time for him to come along because who knows how they would have tried to use him back in the day. Like
they wouldn't, his game wouldn't have developed like this,
right,
for sure.
Right. But I do love every second of watching him. Because it doesn't even make sense how he pulls off half the stuff he does. Like it's just great skill level, great awareness, and being able to do it at a high level. I mean, size helps, but he's just so good. I really enjoy watching him play.
So if we're doing shout outs though, Fred VanVleet's game was crazy.
Oh, yes,
54 for, basically a role player kind of guy. I mean, he's a good player, but he's not really a star like, the other guys we talked about.
I guess he could have been on our non-all-star guy because he hasn't made an all-star game yet.
Yeah, but he don't have enough criteria yet. And
I agree.
Who should he have made it over when Bradley Beal was averaging 31 and like 6 and 5 last year and didn't make it? But that's my other shout out. Bradley Beal. Crazy good, criminally good, doesn't get talked about enough.
Well, it's because the team's not good, but
yeah, he's on a terrible team. I wish,
but he's also very efficient. So
And to me, the most surprising one was Mitch's guy, Sexton for the Cavs. Now he did it against a truly woeful defensive team, like they are scrubs on defense, but still 42 is 42, man, no matter how you get it. And he did it really well. So that's another shout out for me.
I also want to shout out an entire team and spend a minute or so talking about the Utah Jazz. Best record in the league right now. They're 20-5 as of tonight. They are a lot of fun to watch for me. And I didn't expect to say this. Growing up, when we talked about the Jazz, it was Stockton and Malone. And, I didn't like them or whatever. But now it's a totally different league. And how they play is really fun to watch. They play a 4-out, 1-in style where Gobert – you want to talk about a somewhat underrated guy, even though he does get he does get some plaudits and flowers or whatever. But he's a guy that's a great defensive player, but also almost your ideal, lob to the basket guy, your ideal dive guy on the pick and roll. And then you got a star in the making, Donovan Mitchell, a non-all-star, and Mike Conley, and then just shooters everywhere. Mm-hmm. They got 5 guys shooting 40% or better from 3, and then Jordan Clarkson, who's an elite off the bench scorer, right below 40%.
Yeah.
And you got other underrated
Cleveland
guys. Other underrated guys, in my opinion. Joe Ingles, to me, is one of these
he's one of our guys. He's one of our
Yeah, he's a floor-raising player, and he's so good on both ends of the floor. Can create shots for others as well as
he talks that talk. I love it.
I really like.
I think Benny, we're seeing with the Jazz what could have been last year if they were healthy. Yes. They just weren't healthy at the right time.
Yeah.
I mean, they go into that bubble healthy as they are now, rolling. I mean, look, they pushed the Nuggets to what? It was 7, right? They went 7 with the Nuggets.
Yeah, in first round.
And so who's to say they don't get through to the Lakers and maybe push them if they're healthy? I mean, that's a good team, man.
And it's going to be interesting to see how it plays out. I mean, obviously they might not stay the best record in the league all season, but they are really that good. Defensively, they funnel everything to Gobert, and he's an elite shot blocker, but he's actually really good at moving his feet for a big as well. Shooting all around, Bojan Bogdanovic is a great shooter. You got
they missed him so much last year.
Royce O'Neal's shooting above 40% and is like a 3-and-D, almost PJ Tucker-ish type player for them.
He's man, I had a good comp for him last year. I'll think of it. Keep going though.
And then like I said, you got Donovan Mitchell quickly kind of turning into a star in this league.
Right.
It's really fun to watch them just run the pick and roll, swing the ball around, attack closeouts, and play. And I would say also with Ingles, Clarkson, and Conley, you got a whole bunch of other guys that can create off the dribble too. It's not just Mitchell. So they have a balanced attack that few teams can match.
Agreed. I think the only question for them long term is when you get to the playoffs, can that almost non-star laden team, can they get it done? We don't see that happen much.
Right. And I guess the truth is, and this is a debatable proposition because everybody's going to say Mitchell's their best player because he's their best offensive scorer. Rudy Gobert is their best player if you talk like totality of basketball,
or at least most important piece, maybe.
Yeah, because you couldn't take him off the floor because he's not only their linchpin on defense, but he's actually their offensive linchpin as well because of his ability to set screens and roll. And you have to count for him. You have to count for him.
You can't give him free runs to the rim or it's over. I just wonder. I like that matchup though with the Lakers because as good as Jokic is or was last year. Defensively, he wasn't a match for AD.
Right.
I think Gobert is a match where, we have a guy now who I just wonder, does AD get star calls and get Gobert in foul trouble?
That's true. And then the other trouble is they don't necessarily have a wing that can guard LeBron. Their best one being probably Royce O'Neal, but he's not that big. He's not quite as big.
And Ingles is not a bad defender. Honestly.
No, Ingles is a great defender.
Yeah, really. I like Ingles as a defender too. And he gets into your head. I like that about Joe.
Well, let me pose this question because we've seen a lot of high percentages, a lot of high numbers, in just from all around the league.
Right. The Clippers are also shooting over 40% as a team from 3.
Right.
So there's several teams. Yeah.
Why do we think? And this is going to be interesting, and we've already talked about this, but this is, why do we think that this is all going down? Why do we think there's such high numbers and big things happening around the league, from everybody?
Go ahead, Ben.
Well, we saw this even in the bubble. We talked about it last year. It seemed like there was a lot of guys just having breakout performances, that shooting seemed like everything was going in if it was even kind of open. I think part of it has to do with not having fans, or very limited amounts of fans, especially behind the backboards. I heard on, I think, another podcast, maybe it was JJ Redick's, that they think maybe the sight lines are a little bit better as a result of not having fans there. So I think that's part of it. Another part of it that's also COVID related is they don't do anything but play basketball right now. So whatever time they're going to spend, going to the strip clubs or whatever, they're just in the gym shooting, and it's coming out with just unreal percentages for a lot of these players.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, to piggyback off that, totally agree. Sight lines, one, no fans screaming at you. I mean, as great as they are, that does attribute to missed shots sometimes, people getting in your head and yelling. But that third one, to me, not being able to, I mean, let's not kid around here. This is a basketball talk, but these are grown men who do grown men things and go drink adult beverages some nights when they're in South Beach, Miami. It might not play as well the next day. I mean, I think that's a big thing as a lifestyle right now in the NBA is you're training in this basketball kind of like how it was in the bubble. I mean, they were there basketball every day. I think the travel is a little bit better this year. You see a lot of back-to-backs against the same team. You're not
probably
going
helps
on
too.
crazy road trips as you were in prior
I want to make a point from my own profession. I'm a teacher by trade, so personally for me, this year has been one of the healthiest years I've had in terms of illness and just not getting sick, because I've socially distanced myself from things. At school, I have to monitor everything that I touch and everything that the students touch. And, I think, honestly, my veins are now running with hand sanitizer because I use so much. It's just, so I think too, you could say that the players are just healthier, because they have to go through all these tests. They have to, they're not just around a lot of people that could, give them, just the common flu or the common cold. So I think a point could be made for that too. Just saying, let's transition to college real quick. Because I think this is more my arena. But with college, this year has just been absolutely wild. Because, for the first time since 1960, I think it was, there is no blue bloods in the top 25 now. When we talk about blue bloods, we're looking at, unfortunately, my Tar Heels, Duke, Kansas, UCLA, and Kentucky. Yeah, Kentucky. Ben, you made a very good point as to why you think this is a big part of it. Go ahead with that.
Well, just playing around with this, and even Gonzaga, who's like a new blue, if you will. Like,
they really are.
Mm-hmm.
The teams that are built like Gonzaga has been, at least, where they got a lot of veteran players, it seems like it helps them, at least comparatively to programs that are bringing in a lot of one-and-done type talent, and just that they had more time together. With all the COVID protocols and lack of practice before the season started, if you're relying upon, freshman talent and they didn't really get a chance to get themselves acclimated to college basketball, it seems like you just have a little bit of a built-in advantage if you're a veteran team.
Yeah.
So I think teams like Gonzaga, because this is kind of the first year they do have a one-and-done talent in Jalen Suggs.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's kind of the formula, though, we've seen is whether it was Carmelo with Syracuse, finding one true superstar freshman who's a legit lotto pick to go with a mixture of older players, older leaders, guys who have been crippled and hurt in the tournament and know that pain to get you through. When you see these teams, Carolina, Duke, Kentucky, it's a lot of really young guys who are now just playing together for the first time without a ton of older upperclassmen there with them. So I think that's kind of the mix that a lot of these teams are missing. It's too many of the one and dones on one team.
Yeah. And in our conversations this week, we also talked about the fact that they haven't had as much practice time. They didn't have all those summer workouts. They didn't have all the scrimmages. I mean, you're still seeing like amazing numbers. Like Cade Cunningham is unreal. Watching him play a couple of different games. his skill set is, I mean, there's a reason why he's one of the number one, kids coming out of high school. And as a freshman, he's averaging close to 19 points a game. He has over 6 rebounds a game, over 3 assists a game. I mean, he's shooting almost just under 43% from the floor, and Luka Garza out of Iowa, senior. I mean, he's putting up some huge numbers right now. Justin Champagne, the surprise out of Pitt right now, is actually leading the ACC in scoring with over 20 points a game. And, luckily North Carolina beat Pitt this year, but in their first outing. But it was fun to watch that game. And I just remember, Steele, you weren't able to come watch, but I was texting you, and I was like, this Champagne kid can play. Like his.
Oh yeah, it was even funner to watch him beat on Duke a few days earlier.
Yeah, no doubt. And then so of course, me being me, I do have to give a quick shout out to Kerwin Walton out of North Carolina, because he was actually the only out of the 6 ranked recruits, freshmen coming in. North Carolina having one of the best recruiting classes in the nation. Kerwin Walton was the last guy on that list, and he is actually starting. He started the past, I think, plus 10 games. He's shooting 45% from 3-point. His numbers just keep going up. So I had to give a quick shout out to that, just because, yeah, we're North Carolina guys. But then, this whole segment was based on top performances. So we have to mention one player who is just absolutely and a freshman who is just crushing it. And Ben, you texted us the other night saying, turn this on and watch it. And so
it was worth it. It was worth it.
It was worth it. It was one of the best games I've ever watched.
Baby goat.
Yeah. She I've heard of her. I knew she was a monster in high school, and she actually came out of the same high school as Kerwin Walton did. But Paige Beckers, unreal. Ben, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, and Steele and I both said this, like, there's not very often the case that you follow a high school player that's female from the time she's in high school, but she had one of the most wicked mixtapes on YouTube that you'll see from the time she's playing in high school. And, so she had a lot of hype coming into UConn. He's actually been somewhat down. There's been more parity in women's college basketball the last couple of years. South Carolina's built a really good program. Louisville's built a really good program in the last few years. And she's leading a pretty young UConn squad to the top again. And she is special, okay? Like, to me, she looks like the possibility she could be right up there with Taurasi and Maya Moore on the UConn pantheon, and as well as just women's basketball in general pantheon real soon. She lived up to the hype in this 1-2 game this past week. South Carolina was number 1 versus UConn is number 2. It was it was a very close game, went into overtime, but she took over like you would expect to see a true superstar took over late. She scored the last 13 points for UConn. She hit her last 6 shots. They're all contested, difficult mid-range pull-ups, and a 3 that went straight up in the air off the rim and then splashed in to clinch the game for them in overtime. She's just really special. She can score. She can handle. She doesn't even play point guard for them right now because they have another guard that's pretty good, but she's actually an elite passer too. So, like, there's really no weaknesses in her game. I actually really enjoy watching her play, and I think that she's going to be really special for years to come. Yeah. I don't know if she'll stay all 4 years at UConn. Women generally don't come out early to the WNBA.
If they do, I think it's like maybe 1 year early, like a junior year or something.
Right, but to me, she's got to already be one of the top couple players in the entire nation as a freshman in college. I don't know how long she wants to I mean, if she was a man, she'd be a one-and-done type player that go to the NBA draft this year and be, one of the best players in WNBA next year. That's my opinion.
And that number 1 team that she just, beat, pretty much face guarded her for most of that game when she gave the ball up. And she showed some real moxie. She can move off the ball too. It's not like she's just like needs the ball in her hands to dominate you. She had so many backdoor layups, and you got to shout out the bigs. They were throwing nice backdoor passes. Oh yeah. But, she was nice with it, and they couldn't do anything to stop her.
Well, and I'm going to end this with just a quote that Ben said. She hit that go-ahead three at the end that went off camera up into the air and came back down through the hoop. And I was going nuts in my living room trying not to wake everybody else up. But I sent out a text message. Did you see that? And Ben responded with, she just went 6 for 6 in the last, couple minutes of the fourth quarter and into overtime. I think she lived up to the hype I was telling you guys about. So, so she's real. So, just real quick before we end here, Ryan, any closing thoughts from you about anything?
No. I mean, mainly I just want to shout out again the people that reached out to us and showed support and showed love. We appreciate that. We really just do this because we love it. But the support we got was cool. So that's really all I have was thank you guys for listening.
Yes, yeah. And Ben?
Yeah, I want to second that. Like, it's really cool to hear from, a lot of the basketball heads that I've been friends with over the years, not only in high school, but in college and from law school, from guys that I coached with both here in DC and back home. Former players that we coached reaching out, current players for Steel reaching out, and just being like, as excited as we are about this. So, we thank everybody for listening and hope that we can keep building our audience.
And stick with us, man. Make yourself a part of this too. I mean, comment. If you think we're wrong on something, call us out. I want you guys to be a part of this too and be along for this ride. I think it's super cool.
And absolutely going on with that. As I close this out, we have Twitter. Follow us on Twitter. Hit us up for ideas. Follow us on Facebook. Like us on Facebook. We'll be making posts and stuff with that. Like I said earlier in the podcast, we're only streaming off of YouTube, but we're looking to bounce up, here to Spotify, Amazon Music, other streaming services. We do have an email address. Email us, thegiveandgo3@gmail.com. Let us know what you're thinking. Give us ideas, stuff that you want to hear us talk about. We'd be more than happy to hit you up. And again,
we'll drop all the ways to get a hold of us in the YouTube there for you.
Yeah. Make comments. Anything you want to do. Just follow us, like us. We appreciate all the support we've been getting. Episode 3 is going to be coming soon. This has been the Give and Go podcast. My basketball gurus, Ryan Steele, Ben Sperry. I am your host, Mitch Shreve. Again, thank you so much, and we will see you next time.
I'm Ben Sperry, and this was the Give and Go Basketball Podcast.